Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you that are catching this on replay, thank you for joining me. Make sure you hit me up in the chat box here with hashtag replay. I'd love to know if you're catching this on replay or live. I'm always curious. And today you're definitely not going to want to miss this, regardless of whether it's live or on replay, because I have my friend Eloy Lozano here. He's a former student of Freight Broker Bootcamp. I've known him for over a decade. And he's an agent that has done over $10 million in sales as a freight agent throughout his career. So we're going to dive into that a little bit today, but I thought it would be exciting to have him on here. Again, we've known each other for many years. Hey, welcome to the community here, Eloy. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you've been a part of the community for a long time, but this is the first time. I know you've watched some of our lives, but this is the first time you've ever been a guest. And so I'm excited that you're here. We're going to wait for some people to get live. And just so you guys know, we're going to talk about Eloy's journey from kind of starting up over a decade ago to doing over 10 million in sales. Now, this can't be a 3-hour interview. We're probably going to do 20 to 30 minutes on an interview. And then we're going to do some live Q&A at the end where you guys can ask questions. And Eloy and I will try to answer them. I mean, we don't know everything. We don't have the answers to everything, but through our cumulative experience here, I'm sure that we'll probably be able to give you some pretty decent feedback. And so before we get into this, in the chat box here, hit me up, everybody. Let me know the city and state that you're logging in from. I'm going to give you guys a quick shout out, and then we're gonna hit it. We're gonna get after it. Okay? How's that sound, Eloy?
Sounds great. I'm ready.
Awesome. By the way, Eloy is in McAllen, Texas, and I am in Clarence, New York, which is just outside of Buffalo. So let's see where everybody else is. We've got, what do we got here? We got Miss McCoy in Cleveland. We've got Dana Whitley from Houston. We've got Jay Ward from Dallas. We've got GL. We got Cindy Kane from Houston. We got Scott. We got Natalia from Michigan. We got Brandon from Los Angeles. We got Atari. We got Dana Whitley. We got Reginald from Houston. We got James Baxter from Lexington, South Carolina. Natalia again from Detroit. We've got Dana from Houston. E-Man from Georgia. Monsi Cervantes from Morgan Hills, California. Frederick from Chicago. Ramondo from Houston. Lots of people from Texas. Man, Texas is in the house today. Larry from Plano. Lewis from Stone Mountain, Georgia. Brooke from PA. Amanda from Higdon, Alabama. Tina from Stewartsville, Missouri. Facebook user from Rhineville, Kentucky. Tony from Wichita. Esther from Nairobi, Kenya. That might be a first.
That is
Kenya. We always have somebody from another country, usually from maybe South America or Canada or Mexico. But Esther, I think that might be a first. Congratulations. Tris from Massachusetts. What do we got? Myrtle from Houston. More Texas. Man.
Louisiana.
Alma from New Jersey. Jasmine from Maryland. Tej from Toronto. We got another country. There's Canada. Scott from West Palm. Man, I think everybody's pretty excited to hear from you today, my friend. They love to hear, I talk to them all the time. They get sick of hearing from me. I'm going to be honest with you. They get sick of hearing my stories and in my trainings. What they want to really hear about is you. They want to hear about your journey. They want to hear about why you got started, how you got started, some of the lessons you've learned, some of the success you've had. And so that's what we're going to pull apart today. But before we do that, let's just give a couple more shout outs and then we're going to get rolling. Val from Santa Clarita, California, Mike from Atlanta, and Angela from Stone Mountain, Georgia. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining me again. If you're catching me on live, do me a favor. If it's live or replay, you notice how I didn't charge you on the way into this stream. I could have easily charged you to learn from Eloy, but I didn't do that. And here's why, because I want to make sure you guys get good value. But the cost of admission is this: like the stream, share the stream. That's all I charge. Just share the stream. Let everybody know about it. Let others know that there's an opportunity in the freight and logistics industry. Let them know that there's free training like this every Monday at noon because I do these Freight Broker Bootcamp live. So that's the price of admission. And I watch and make sure, and I always know who shares the stream because I get notified by Facebook and on YouTube, whoever shares the stream. So make sure you share the stream. We're going to do the interview, and if you have questions, hold them till the end because we are going to do a live Q&A. All right. So here we go. For those of you that don't know, Eloy is a freight agent. He's been a freight agent for over a decade. He's generated over $10 million in sales as an agent and has made a lot of money along the way. He lives in McAllen, Texas. We've known each other for over a decade. And again, he's a past student of Freight Broker Bootcamp. I want to welcome you once again, my friend. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I've watched your journey. We met.
Oh, man.
Right when you first started, you had this dream. You didn't even have any customers. You were just getting started. I remember. I mean, you remember how long ago that was?
Yep, about 11 years ago.
Yeah, almost. It was like 11 years ago. That's crazy. And so tell us a little bit about why did you decide to get into freight brokering? What was it that interested you about the whole freight brokerage business that made you dive in?
The first thing that I got caught up with was being able to stay at home and work, with my family. That was a big one for me, trying to just staying home, and I saw that it's commissions. I've always been a hustler for that. So, I mean, I put everything I had into it. Just like you said, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out.
Yeah, I'm going to throw my earbuds on really quick because I just want to make sure that we don't run into any reverb here. So give me 1 second on the audio. All right, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, perfect. I think that's going to work great. Yeah, so you like the concept of being able to work from home.
I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah, as a freight agent, it really is amazing. I mean, most people have no clue that most agents work from home. I remember a funny story years ago when I had my brokerage. We had recruited an agent down in Atlanta, and he had been looking at a bunch of different brokerages, and that he might become an agent for, and ultimately his number one reason why he decided to become an agent was the fact that he was going to save an hour and a half to 2 hours a day commute because he lived 6 miles from his office and it took him an hour and a half to 2 hours every day to commute back and forth to work.
Wow.
6 miles. Now, if you know anything about Atlanta, which you do because you're a broker, I'm sure traffic's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare down there. So that working from home and not having a commute is a really powerful reason. Obviously, I'm sure that the income opportunity didn't hurt either.
Not at all.
So tell us how you got started. You started a little bit different. You became a sub-agent when you first started, correct?
Yes, I did. I had no experience, and that's the only way I could get into the business was as a sub-agent. And
explain what a sub-agent is. Explain what a sub-agent is for people that don't understand. We have a freight broker, we have a freight agent, and then we have a sub-agent. Can you explain that for us?
I was an agent for an agent that was under the brokerage.
Right. So you had a freight brokerage that they were operating under their authority. You had an agent that had a contract with them, and then you had a contract with that agent as a sub-agent. So you were getting commission, and what was your commission rate as a sub-agent?
50%.
So he was getting 50%, and his agent that he was working under was getting like 70%. So that agent was making a piece, and Eloy was making a piece, but he went out and developed his own customer base. So tell us a little bit about that, the early days of developing your customer base. I know you focus in on produce now, but was that your niche back then?
That's always been my niche, simply because I live in McAllen. The trade zone that's here is all produce. There is dry freight, but you got big companies like England that handles that freight. So my only other option at the time was produce. So that's where I started getting all my business from, was 99% produce.
So it was not only produce, but it was local in your area.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. So how did you go out and get some of your first clients? Did you go out and meet them face to face? Was it over the phone? Was it referrals? Was it people you knew?
it was a lot of face to face, walking around the produce market, business cards, you know, also word of mouth, referrals, a lot of cold calling. I did a lot of cold calling. I
Yeah.
would do about 80 to 100 calls a day just for cold calling.
Yeah. So notice he said three different things. He not only did cold calling, he also got referrals, and he also did face to face. So what I tell people is you got to get on the whatever it takes plan,
You
right?
have,
That's what it
yeah.
is. It's whatever it takes. If one thing doesn't work, do something else. But the fact is you got to figure out a way to have conversations with your target market, whoever that is. And in this case, it was produce buyers and sellers, right? People that are growers, retailers, wholesalers, brokers, people in and around the produce industry. So you just started having a lot of conversations.
I did, and it's a very competitive market. I mean, you have a lot of people trying to hit that market up.
Sure.
I still do LTL. That's my main thing is LTL. So a lot of people don't want to do that. It's a little bit harder than doing one-on-ones. But I mean, it keeps me busy throughout the entire year.
I love that. So here's an example of a niche within a niche. Everybody asks me all the time, how do I find my niche? What niche should I go after? What are the best freight niches? I mean, this is probably one of the most popular questions I get, top 10 for sure. And so what Eloy did was not only did he focus in on a niche, which was produce, it's a big niche, but it's definitely a niche because it's, there's definitely some nuances and some learning curve when it comes to shipping produce. Okay. So you gotta have some specialized knowledge, and you can learn that on the job. But not only did he figure out that he wanted to pursue the produce niche, but he decided to focus in on LTL. So most brokers that focus in on produce do full truckload, right? So they're doing full truckloads of produce from point A to point B, and they're doing, and that's what they get paid for. But Eloy does LTL. So explain to us the difference. Are you talking about one pallet, two pallets, three pallets? You're talking about quarter trucks, half trucks, that's
whatever it takes to get the job done. I mean, right now I'm actually starting a new order. I got 4 pallets. I got to fill that up before the day ends and get a truck for it, which I already have a truck. I go from 4 pallets. I'll take 10. After 10, I need 6 more, and I try to find those 6. Either I find 2 more orders of 3 pallets a piece, or if I'm lucky enough to find a 6 pallet order and fill it up, and that's what it takes. You just got to keep making those phone calls to get the.
And so with 6 pallets, you might have potentially 2, 3, 4, 5 different shippers in that load.
Yeah, man, bro, I've gotten 10 pallet orders.
You're breaking up real quick, but we're gonna hopefully you're gonna come back here. You're breaking up, but hopefully you're gonna get back. Be patient, people. He's buffering a little bit. Hopefully the stream is not buffering as a whole, but can you guys still hear me? Let me know in the chat box if you can still hear me. I know he's buffering. Hopefully he comes back in. Just let me know in the chat box if you guys can still hear me. Let me know for sure if you guys can still hear me. Apparently he's having some technical difficulties. Okay, so you can hear him. All right, so we're going to give him a minute or so, and hopefully he can get back into the stream. If not, we're going to have to pivot. So we lost him really quick. He's probably going to try to go out and come back in. So in the meantime, let's just talk about that for a second, right? So I'm going to try to fill some dead air here. Okay. I want to give you guys value. So talking about that niche, right? Talking about niching down as a freight broker. I'm a huge believer in riches are in niches. Now, as a freight broker, even in other business models outside of logistics, I've always been a niche player. And so produce is one of those niches. And you can see how, Eloy went into produce and he started focusing probably on truckload, and he found out that it was a little more competitive. And what he did was, while he could make money, he niched out an even smaller niche that was even in higher demand, that he identified as a higher demand service, which is LTL. So what he's now doing, or what he was just describing to us before we lost him, and I'm going to message him here on Facebook. is that he was, okay, let's see, here we go. Boom, you made it back.
Yes, yes.
All right, we lost
Sorry.
you. That's okay. No worries. No worries. We, it happens from time to time. Everybody's been pretty patient. So I was just filling some dead air here talking about riches are in niches and how you were able to niche down. Hopefully we don't lose you again. It looks like you might have frozen again. You there? Yeah, I think you there? Yeah, I
Dang it.
yeah, it's okay. You there? All right. So I think we're going to have some technical difficulty with Eloy, and I apologize. Worst case scenario, we will reschedule and get him on here. Let's see. Let's remove this. Remove. Let's see what this does. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Well, hopefully we can keep you connected.
Man, I hope so.
Yeah. So anyway, before we get disconnected, why don't you tell everybody about how that LTL produce works? Because you're basically consolidating a bunch of different shippers' orders, and then you're running that with a refrigerated truck. Tell us a little bit more about that, how that works. Yeah, I think, guys, so I'm going to dive in here and I'm going to kind of just I'm going to backfill it.
It's mainly yeah, I do fill up a whole truck with 3 or 4 different customers or shippers. And I'll probably end up having about 3 to 4 different deliveries. My main niche is from McAllen to Florida. I have tons of business going that way. So I'll probably end up having a drop in Jacksonville, Daytona, 2 drops in Pompano. I mean,
All right. So again, a little bit of technical difficulty, but are you there?
what was that, bud?
We lost you a little bit. You were talking about having multiple drops going into Florida, Texas.
Okay, let me try to get on my phone. I think it'll work better.
All right, give that a shot. And in the meantime, so guys, just so you know, now we've identified an even third level of a niche. As he's trying to get back in here, we've identified the third level, which is he niched down into produce, he niched down into LTL, and now he's niched down into a primary lane. So he's going from McAllen to Florida, and he's doing multiple drops in and through Florida. Okay, so he's not only niched down into produce, he's niched down into LTL, and he's niched down into a lane. Do you understand what I mean? Now, do you see what I mean by riches are in niches? He made over $24,000 in commissions in November of this year in that niche of a niche of a niche. So you have to understand there's a ton of business out there, and everybody focuses on these big, van markets, or just straight van, or just flatbed, or just refrigerated. And there's opportunity there. But what you're going to find is when you really start to hit the ball strong is when you niche your way down, because you can become an expert in that niche, right? It's a lot easier to become an expert and a valuable resource in that niche. How are you? Are you hearing me, Eloy?
Yeah, I'm listening. Yes, sir.
All right. I didn't know if you could hear me or not. So it sounds like you're back. So I'm going to let you take over. So what I just explained to you, did that do justice to explaining how your niche works?
Yes, it did. It really did.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and you said it, people try to look for those big contract loads, and you got to lock down a freight rate, and sometimes you can't meet that demand. Let's say you say, well, I can do this load for $1,500 year round. Sometimes it's going to take a little bit more money, and you're going to have to put that money out of your pocket to come through for your customer. So it's a lot easier with LTL. You can change the rate a little bit more often, to get the job done.
Yeah. And produce, that's another interesting component that you just brought up. Produce has a tendency to operate more in the spot market, right?
Yes.
Because what happens with produce is it's a perishable, right? You can't leave watermelons or strawberries or any fruits or vegetables sitting around for too long.
No,
They've got to get shipped.
Yeah.
And so it operates in a spot market, which means the buyers and sellers and the people that are using brokers are always looking for a current rate. And that rate can vary from day to day, week to week, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
From day to day, I mean, you'll be paying, a certain rate to Florida one day, and the next day you're up $800 or you're down $400.
Right. And that has nothing to do with you as a broker. That has to do with the market. It has to do with supply and demand of trucks, correct? I talk to people all the time about freight rates. And I always explain to them, like any market, economics 101, supply and demand is what drives price. And so when you have more trucks in a market and less freight, then rates are going to go down. When you have less trucks and more freight, rates are going to go up. It's really simple concept. And from day to day, the number of trucks in and out of McAllen or in and out of McAllen willing to go to Florida varies. I mean, on a Friday, you might have tons of trucks. On Monday, you might not have any trucks.
It happens all the time. Even if I have a big truck base to Florida, and it still happens to me.
Yeah. So do you work with a lot of owner operators?
I do. They're a little bit more responsible. They take care of the truck, they check the reefer, they do what they're supposed to do. And some guys, you get a big company that has a 150 trucks and go. And with the bill ratings, if you sign for 600 boxes and you deliver 500, you're liable for 100 boxes because you signed for it.
Yeah. So you focus and prefer smaller carriers, owner operators versus larger fleets.
I do because I also do my own dispatching, and I stay up all night making sure my trucks get loaded. So
yeah, gotcha.
I can provide that service.
So how many owner operators do you think core carrier database, right? The core number of carriers that you use the most, because there's always those one and dones. I mean, sometimes you got to fill a load and you don't have a truck. But how many do you think you have of core carriers that you use all the time?
I got about 15 companies that I use.
About 15 different companies?
Sure.
And they run with you, not necessarily exclusively, but heavily.
I at least 3 to 4 trucks a week with them.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. With each guy.
That's awesome. Good.
Yes.
All right, cool. So we talked a little bit about how you got started as a sub agent. Now and we talked about your niche. Let's talk a little bit about some of the changes that you've made recently. You went from being a sub agent for many years to now becoming your own agent. This was this past year, correct? Was it 19 or 20?
In February.
Yeah. So early in 2020, you broke out and became your own agent. Tell us a little bit about, one, why you did that, and two, how it's went since then.
The reason I did that, it's because it's like I had blinders on and I didn't know what was going on around me. The transparency wasn't what it was supposed to be. And I mean, I'm glad I got out of that, because now I see my transparency, and I'm learning a lot more about the business, what it takes to run the business, because it's not easy at all. I mean, you need to know what you're doing in this business.
Yeah. So you were working as a sub agent. And so what you're saying is that agent, you weren't able to get all the information you needed from the primary broker because it was buffered in some ways, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
he was filtering the information. You didn't know how much he was making. You didn't know what was being paid always or what wasn't being paid. And there was just an issue with communications and transparency.
It was, and I really didn't know what I was going to get paid till I got my paycheck. And that was really hard for me for a long time.
It wasn't very predictable because they didn't give you any visibility into what was going to get paid.
Yeah, they wouldn't. And I didn't have access on their software to check what I was going to make.
Yeah. And while starting as a sub agent paid you well, and you made 6 figures and you did very well for many years, you pivoted out and becoming your own agent. And now you get what's your commission rate now? 60%?
Yes, sir. 60%.
So he gets 60% of the profit. So let me just break that down for people that are new to this. If he pays if a shipper is going to pay him $1,000 just for easy math to move a load, and he pays a carrier $800, that leaves $200 in gross profit. Okay. On that 200, he would get 60% or $120 on that load. Okay. Now let's take an example of a load you just did recently, one that stands out from McAllen, an LTL load from McAllen to Florida. You don't need to tell us who the shipper is. Just tell us what you charged the shipper and what you paid the carrier and about what you made on that load, roughly.
My last one was actually this morning. I got 4,200 on it, and I paid 38 on it because it's one of my regular carriers, and I wanted to actually make sure I got the job done because this shipper is very important to me, and I needed one of my best trucks on that.
Yeah, and so ultimately, the shipper is going to pay him 4,200. He pays a carrier 38. He made $400, which is almost 10%. Now, would you rather? Now, most people don't understand this. They think about margin percentage. You know, what you have to understand is I'd rather have 10% of a $4,000 load than 20% of a $2,000 or of a $1,000 load, right? Because ultimately you're making more money, but people start to get caught up in the percentage of 10% or 20%. I mean, with produce, they have a tendency to be higher ticket items. Typically, you know, it's not uncommon to have a $4, $5, $6, even $10,000 load. It's sometimes depending upon the lane it's running in, depending upon the complexity, depending upon all those different variables.
The supply and demand has a lot to do with it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay, cool. So we talked about that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, if you could start over, okay? If you could start over and wave a magic wand and start over today, knowing what you know now, right? Knowing what you know now. Besides the whole sub-agent thing, because I know that you wish you broke out sooner, what would be one thing that you would change? What would be one thing you would do different besides that sub-agent component? Because I know you wish you broke out a little earlier, but besides that, what would you do?
Right this second, I don't think I would do. I would just probably still be an agent right now. I really like the back office support. You know, they do my invoicing. You know, they get my comp checks. So the back office support, it's really great. I do want to open my own brokerage, but that won't probably be till another year or two from now. But I would just probably stay where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, and this is something that people resist. A lot of people that join Freight Broker Bootcamp, right, join my course, they all want to become a broker. Mm-hmm. And I tell them, listen, more power to you. That's what I did. But I also tell people, don't overlook the agent opportunity, because what you just said was this: as a freight agent, it takes very little money to get started. Yeah. There's very little barrier to entry. There's a lot less risk. And I tell everybody, if you can't make money as a freight agent, you're definitely not going to make money as a freight broker. Okay. Because it's easier as a freight agent. It just is. You have less moving parts. Right. So I tell everybody, you have to understand, it's not a bad thing to start as an agent. It's okay, particularly if you don't have any industry experience, and you don't have a lot of capital, or you don't have any real capital. Again, as a broker, you can always use factoring, but a lot of times, it's just not the right fit to start as a freight broker. But what's really great is that you've been an agent for over 10 years, and now you're just considering really breaking out as your own broker, maybe in the next year or two.
Yes, sir.
And you're being very cautious about it. You're being very strategic about it. You're not rushing into it. And along the way, you're making a lot of money. I mean, you made $24,000 in November. I mean, you're making a great living working from home. I mean, so you have a lot of people that just don't understand the opportunity as an agent. They think that they're not going to make as much money, but in reality, you have a way less risk and a ton of opportunity. I mean, that's a perfect example. I mean, go ahead.
And it also gives you a chance to build a better book of business, because at the end of the day, I mean, to run a brokerage, you need to have, high numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you also it allows you to earn while you learn, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're now getting a much better understanding of the whole invoicing component and the technology side and all the other things that would be required, but you're making money along the way. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, all right. So tell us a little bit about, let's talk about sales a little bit, right? Let's talk a little bit about getting new clients, right? Okay. So when you first started, you talked about cold calling and getting on the whatever it takes plan, right?
Yes.
Whatever it
Yes.
took, you were getting clients. You just wanted to have conversations with those people. Tell us a little bit about how you get clients now. Like your last client, the newest client that just came on with you recently. How did that happen?
Right now, it's a lot easier to get it done. Number one, the experience. Number two, the referrals. Now you got people calling me. You got clients calling you. Hey, I heard you're really good at doing LTL out of the McAllen area going to Florida. Can you help me out? Of course. First I have to check on their credit line, but it's a lot easier to get customers now.
Yeah. So a lot of your customers come through referral now.
A lot of referral. Yes, sir.
And that's because of the niche that you've created, the reputation that you've built, and the expertise that you've demonstrated over an extended period of time.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to be very transparent, and I'm sure you will. When you first start, getting customers is not always easy.
No, it's difficult. It's very difficult, and you got to get used to them telling you, we already have somebody doing that lane, or we have somebody that we're happy with. You're gonna get a lot of those. I would make about 75 to 100 phone calls a day before I got one yes.
But guess what? Look where he is now.
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't trade anything for it.
No.
So if you're willing to pay the price, right? I tell everybody what you lack in experience, what you lack in credibility, and what you lack in resources, you have to make up for in numbers.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes, and you have to make up for it in time. I get a lot of people who come into the course and start their business, and they get very frustrated their first month in the business because it's not going exactly the way they want. Everything's not flowing perfectly. And, they're getting some rejection, and then they give up. And I tell everybody, listen, you can't quit, No,
you can't. You got to keep going. You got to sacrifice.
You got to absolutely sacrifice. It might take you months, but ultimately, and sometimes I did another interview with another student and friend of mine, a client, Franklin and Deckway, who his second month in the business did 25,000 in profit, but that's not the norm, right? That's not the norm, but it can happen.
It does happen.
It can happen. But had he quit before that could happen for him, he'd be nowhere. He'd be nowhere. He'd be broke, but yet now he's making a great living, doing extremely well. So
it's tough.
Go ahead. Yeah, it can be tough when you first get started, but once you get that ball moving,
you got to keep going.
It gets a lot easier for sure. Absolutely. All right. So is there anything else that you want to share about your journey, whether it be lessons learned or tips or advice to people about coming into the industry, people that are new? Because most of the people that are watching this are brand new to the industry. Either they're just considering getting started, they just joined my Freight Broker Bootcamp online course, or maybe they've been in the wings trying to get their brokerage going for the last few months or maybe up to a year. Any advice for any of those people?
My biggest advice is if you can get your foot in the door, even as an assistant or a dispatcher or whatever you have to do to get your foot in the door, just do it. Learn the business from the bottom, because you got to get started from the bottom. Because there's no shortcuts. There is no shortcuts, and you got to work your butt off to get there.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of sacrifice.
It is. It really is.
But at the end of the day, the reason why I've highlighted these interviews with people like you and Monica Gonzalez and Yogi Goswami and Franklin and Deckway is because, the fact is it wasn't easy for any of those people, but they've been doing it now for several years, some for a few years, some for as much as a decade, and they wouldn't change anything. But you have to, I tell everybody, do your best, never quit. You've got to put your head down. You got to be willing to make some of those sacrifices. So listen, I really appreciate you being here and being so transparent and honest about everything. I want to congratulate you on everything. I'm very proud of you, as I've seen you develop over time. I met you when you were how old are you now?
I'm 34. You met me when I was 23.
Yeah, I met him when he was a baby, right? He was basically a baby. You got to remember, he's how 30? What'd you say? You're 34?
34.
Yeah, so I'm going to be 51 in about less than a month here. So I'm proud of you. You've done an amazing job. I know that your family's proud of you. I know you've really sacrificed. I know you're a big family man. We're connected on Facebook. I know you spend a lot of time with your family, and that's your why, and that's what really drove you through those early days to to see some success. So listen, we're going to do some live Q&A. All right. So we're going to try to field some questions from the audience. Hopefully your tech will hold up here.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm very disappointed.
That's okay. No worries. Hey, listen, that's how technology is. The internet is sometimes unpredictable. But listen, either way, I think people have gotten some real value out of the interview, and hopefully we can do some questions. So if you have questions and you're on this live or on replay, if you're on this live, we're going to try to answer those questions now. We definitely will not get to all of them, but we will try to come back into the feed later this week and answer some of those questions. So fill up the chat bot with some questions, and I'll be back in about 1 minute.
Rislin Chick, Eloy, how did you pick an agent company to work for when you changed? I'm an agent for 9 years, but thinking to switch company, not treating me well. What can you recommend me? I would recommend a company that does have a good established credit line that has been in business for a while, and that gives you comp checks in a pretty decent time.
Sorry, guys. Listen, it's the holiday season, and they're putting up my Christmas lights outside. So I got dogs barking. I got people knocking on the door, and I've got my friend Eloy here willing to answer some questions. So I hope you guys have some good questions. Let's check it out real quick. It looks
I answered Rislin Chick.
Okay, you answered that question. How did you pick an agent company to work for? Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you gave some feedback. I'd love to hear that answer. What did you say?
I told them to make sure they if they're gonna jump to another company, to make sure they have a good established credit line and they get you comp checks in a quick time. That way your trucks don't have to be at the fuel island waiting for a comp check.
Yep. Make sure they got good credit. Make sure they have all the services like ComCheck. Make sure they got good technology. Make sure they've been in business for a period of time. Yep. Absolutely. Cool. All right. Let's field another one here. All right. So here, I'll answer this one. This is a little bit more geared towards brokerage. When getting my bond, should I use my personal Social Security number or my business LLC EIN? When you get your bond, they're going to ask for your Social Security number because it goes based on your personal credit. So your EIN or your business LLC credit won't matter. Okay. It's going to operate off your personal credit. So if you have a good credit score, let's say you've got 700, 800 credit, you're going to get a very low bond rating, right? It's going to cost you very little. And if you have average credit, say 600 to 700, it's going to cost you a little bit more. And if you have lower credit, it's going to cost you more. And that's where some people decide not to become a broker to start, and they become an agent. Okay. And then they build up their credit, they build up their book, they build up their resources. And then sometimes they become an agent later, sometimes, or become a broker later. Sometimes they just stay an agent like Eloy did for over 10, 11 years now. Okay. Yes. So good question. Thanks. All right. So PJ has a question. Oh, that's not a question. That's right, Ricky. It's hard, but don't give up. Absolutely. All right. So here's a question. Please give advice on how to work with factoring companies. All right. So I'm not sure exactly what advice you're looking for. And again, I'm not sure how much Eloy will be able to contribute to this because his broker probably handles most of that for him, which is another advantage of being an agent, right? Again, once again, an advantage. So advice of working with a factoring company. So here's a couple pieces of advice. Make sure that they're obviously are reputable and have been in business for at least 5 years. Okay. I wouldn't do business with a factoring company that has not been in business for at least 5 years. They may, if they're younger than that, they may still do good business, but I really want somebody who's established, right? I don't want to give my invoices to someone who's just learning the business, right? And is just trying to break into the business. Number two, there's more to just working with factoring companies than the actual rate of factoring. You're going to find out that factoring typically costs somewhere between 2 and 5% of the invoice. But there's also recourse and non-recourse, which means that when you factor an invoice for a shipper to a factoring company, if it's recourse factoring, it means that if that shipper doesn't pay that invoice, then it's going to come back on you eventually. Versus non-recourse, it may be a higher percentage, but there might not be any recourse on it, and they take the full risk of it. So those are a couple of tips on factoring. I can't give you a lot because I never factored my invoices. We always financed everything ourselves, and it was difficult at times, but we were able to manage it. But we were in a little bit different position financially when we started the business. So, but factoring is a very viable option. Okay. So let's go to the next question. All right. So let's figure this one out. This one's for you, Eloy. How do you come up with your freight rates?
Oh man,
you got an interesting niche. I'd love to hear your formula for how you come up with freight rates, because you're putting together LTL loads.
The rate I come up with my rates, they fluctuate about once every 3 to 4 months. They'll fluctuate. I try to stay like at the per pallet rate, at least $20 on top of where I have to be, just because you never know if you're gonna end up with two pickups, or you never know if you're gonna end up with 5 pickups. So you want to make sure you have enough money to cover your freight,
Yeah. So if I came to you and I said, listen, I've got 2 pallets that I want to go from McAllen to Miami, what would be, besides in your head, right? Besides just knowing that in your head, what would be a process that someone could use to identify the cost so that they could mark it up?
That's very easy. When somebody tells me that they have 1 pallet or 2 pallets, automatically it's going to be a high rate. The per pallet rate is going to be a lot higher than when somebody has 8 or 9 pallets or 10 pallets, because you're just putting on an extra pick and an extra drop on the order. That each truck at least wants $100 to $150 per stop. And
okay.
It also depends if I'm sorry. It depends if those 2 pallets, where they're going, because I may be able to end up finalizing in Tampa, but if those 2 pallets are going to Miami, then yeah, they're gonna be a lot higher than usual.
Okay. So what you do is, do you look at the price of an entire truck, like what it costs an entire truck, or do you ask the carriers, how much they need per pallet? And then mark it up.
Well, you do go off a full truck. You can, let's say you're getting 4,200 to Miami on a full truck of 20 pallets. Then you divide the 4,200 by 20.
Okay. Right? So you're breaking it out that way.
Yes, sir. And then, like I said, it depends the number of pallets they give you and what the commodity is, because every pallet has a different weight. Not every pallet, but every different produce. You got berries that are light, you got carrots that are heavy. Right. Obviously, the carrots, they're not worth as much as berries would be, the per pallet rate, but they do take a lot of space in the truck.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're heavier. Yeah.
They're heavier.
Yep. So a couple of fundamentals that you guys can pull from that. Number one, is one of the best ways to understand if you're talking about full truckload is to actually talk to trucks, right? You want to talk to carriers that are running that lane. That is the best information, right? That you can get on what the cost basis is, and you can mark it up. So in that example, if you knew you were going to run a full truckload from McAllen to Tampa and it was going to cost you 4,200 because you've already talked to trucks, now you're going to mark that up 200, 400, 500, whatever you're going to mark that up. Okay. So it would be a cost plus. If you're going to do LTL and you're going to be doing LTLs or partials, what you can look at is you can base it on a percentage based on the number of pallets of the full truckload. So if a full truckload costs you 4,200 and that's for 20 pallets and you're going to be sending 10 pallets, then a good starting point of that is probably going to be around half of that 4,200 roughly. Right. So that'll give you a good starting point. So those are some of the fundamentals. There is software out there particularly for full truckload, not for what Eloy does from a pallet basis, but from a full truckload perspective, whether that be the DAT or Truck Stop. And sometimes depending upon the seasonality, depending upon the lane, depending upon a lot of different variables, that information has some validity, but it's really not an exact pricing point. It's more of a starting point. Does that make sense, Eloy? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Yes, sir.
Yeah. That information is valuable for you to understand, particularly when you're discovering new lanes or it's a lane that you've never moved before. But again, the most valuable information you can get is to actually talk to a carrier that's already run that lane or specializes in that lane, and then use that as a cost plus markup. So, all right. Hope that helps. Let's see what else we got here. What other questions? Oh, there's a bunch here. I think I've already went past them. All right, let's see. All right, what is the? All right, we kind of talked about that already. I'm just scrolling through to find some questions. All right, so here's a question from Dana Whitley. We're a small carrier that has primarily sprinters, just a few box trucks. Is it better to start as an agent or a brokerage to learn more about getting our own freight? All right, so some of that's going to depend upon how you're getting your freight now. Dana, if you're getting your freight from brokers now, right, and you're using brokered loads and you don't have any direct shippers and you're not experienced with getting direct shippers, then, you're going to have to learn that regardless, whether you're an agent or whether you're a broker, right? You're going to have to learn how to do that outreach. So I don't know the answer to that question, but that's going to be an important step. The other question for you would be, do you have are you comfortable? Do you have the financial resources to get set up as a broker? Do you have the ability to get your bond? Do you have the ability to get your authority? Do you have the ability to, set up com checks with com data and things of that nature? Do you have the ability to do that? If you have the ability to do that, then maybe becoming a broker is not a big deal for you right now. And that might be a good step. But if you don't have those resources and you don't have that, then starting out as an agent is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still have your carrier business, which runs under your carrier brand. And then you could do brokered loads under an agent brand, which would be somebody else's brokerage. So it seems like it might be a little bit confusing, but it wouldn't be that bad. You can keep them separated until you're ready to merge them together. And then eventually you could pivot over into becoming your own broker. So that's a little bit of advice. I hope that helps. Again, it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but I don't have all the details to fill in the blanks as far as exactly where you are in your business right now. So I hope that helps. All right, here's a question. Can you start as a freight broker and still be successful? Absolutely. That's what I did. I mean, some people, like to start out as an agent, like Eloy. He started out as a sub agent, then became an agent, and eventually may become his own broker. But I'll give you a perfect example. Franklin Ndekwe is a gentleman that I interviewed in the last couple of months, past student of my Freight Broker Bootcamp online course. He became his own broker, and his second month did over $25,000 in profit. Yogi Goswami, who's another past student of my course, who lives in India. He's never been to the United States, lives in India, became a broker like 3 or 4 years ago. His last year did over $4.8 million in sales. Wow. And he lives in India, never been to the United States, right?
Where does he move freight? Here in the U.S.?
He moves all his freight here in the U.S., but he's never been here.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very cool, right? Isn't that awesome? So you absolutely can start as a freight broker, but if you're not comfortable or you don't have the resources to get the bond, to get the authority, to get set up with com data for fuel advances and stuff like that, it's okay to start as an agent. There's nothing wrong with it at all. This is the proof is in the pudding. Eloy's here. He made $24,000 in November. Who in this audience would trade places with him right now? Probably all of you, right? Because he's done amazingly well. So I hope that answers the question, Jasmine. All right, so here's a question. What do you do if you sign a 1-year contract with a shipper and get locked up on a rate, but along that line, the lane is higher than what the shipper is paying you to move that load? Eloy alluded to it earlier, which is if you do an annual contract with a shipper, there's only 2 things that can happen. Well, there's 3 things that can happen. 1, you can honor that rate and potentially lose money, which probably isn't a very viable option for most of you. You can decline the loads, meaning you can refuse the loads from the shipper and you're going to probably lose the shipper.
Yeah.
Or 3, you can raise the rates and you can explain to them that because of market conditions, because of changes, because of COVID, because of seasonality, because of this, whatever the case may be, that stimulated the rates to change so much, you can have a conversation with them and negotiate a higher rate, even if it's temporarily, until the rates start to settle back down, and then you can agree to bring the rates back down. Those are really the only three options. Do you agree, Eloy, or is there another strategy you might use?
No, I would definitely go with option number 3.
Yeah.
And depending on how much business I get from the shipper, I would go, if option number 3 doesn't work, I would go to option number 1 and leave option number 2. I wouldn't even want to do that.
Yeah. And so you don't want to refuse the freight if you have a choice, because ultimately you're lose that shipper. And the lifetime value, I talk about this all the time, the lifetime value of a shipper. Again, I mean, if you have a shipper that you're doing $500,000 a year with, and you do business with that shipper for 10 years, that's $5 million that you're giving away because of, potentially based on the decision that you make, either 1 through 3, right? So most shippers understand, particularly in this day and age with the weird business climate because of everything that's happened with COVID, that rates have a lot of fluctuation, and they've understand that. Now, under normal circumstances, when rates are very stable, I'm going to take an opportunity to expand on this. When rates are very stable, just know one thing. Shippers are going to be a lot less forgiving, right? They're going to say, listen, you gave me this rate. I need you to honor this rate. And you're going to have to make a decision or negotiate hard on that. But here's one thing I want to talk about. And this is an opportunity. And this is what most people don't think about. When rates are very stable, and there have been times in my career when rates didn't fluctuate much. They were very stable. Fuel was very stable. Freight rates were very stable. And, we would have rates that would hold with shippers for months, sometimes over a year, with the same rate, and it would never change. But when rates are stable, it's very hard to break into the industry. It's very hard to break into a shipper, because it goes to that old adage, right?
Yeah.
If a shipper doesn't feel any pain, or they don't have any issues, or there's no instability, they're not typically looking for new brokers. So I say the absolute best time to get shippers, is when the market is unstable. When the market is unstable, that opens the door for you to get your foot in. Because what happens is they've already had a carrier or a broker that's raised their rates. They've already had a carrier or broker that's underserving them, either bad service or refusing freight or whatever the case may be. They've got pain, they've got issues. And because of that instability and the issues that come from that, that's your opportunity to get your foot in the door. So I prefer an unstable market when getting new shippers, because when you have a very stable and non-fluctuating market, it makes it a lot harder. Now, you can still break in, but it makes it a lot harder because they're not feeling any pain, right? Everything's the same. Does that make sense to you? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. Yes, sir.
Yeah, perfect. All right. A couple more questions, and then we're going to let Eloy go, because he's got a bunch of freight to move today, and I don't want to take up his whole day. So we're going to do let's do one more question. And then I promise to come back in here in the next week and answer the questions in the chat box. You guys continue to ask questions, but I want him to be able to get to work. He's got to make some money. So let's scroll down through. I'm going to pick one more question. Let me see if I can pick one more question that would be relevant. All right. So here's a good question. I'm brand new here. How are agents paid? Is it net 30 type thing, or can you get paid constantly as you do loads? All right. So Eloy, tell us about how you get paid, meaning when you move a load compared to when you get paid on that load. How does it work?
It depends who you're working with.
For you right now, how does it work?
Right now is on what I invoice. Whatever I invoice is what I'm going to get paid on my next pay period.
So that means he books a load with a shipper. He finds a carrier. He delivers out the load. When the carrier then sends the bill of lading and the invoice to the office or to him, right? Yeah. At that point, he's going to invoice the shipper. And upon invoicing the shipper, you get paid the following week?
Yes, sir. Correct.
So when he invoices his shipper, they already know what the profit is. Again, if there was $1,000 to the shipper and $800 to the carrier, there's $200 in margin because he's already got both invoices. He knows the true profit. And at that point, the following week, his broker will pay him that 60% commission, which is $120.
Correct.
That's very normal, right? That's how we used to do it as well at LDI, my brokerage. Agents would get paid on everything that was invoiced the prior week. Now, some companies as agents, they won't pay you until the shipper pays. So
collect.
What's that?
On the other one, I would get paid on what you collect.
Yeah. So that's collected money. So when the money comes in from the shipper, that's when you get paid. So those are the two primary ways that you'll get paid, either on invoiced or on collected, right? So if Eloy moves a load today and he invoices it next week, he would get paid the following week. That's a typical timeline, right?
I try to invoice as soon as they deliver. I try to get my bill lading so I can invoice.
That's right. Perfect. All right. So listen, guys, I hope that helped. I hope that answered your questions. I apologize that we had a little bit of technical difficulty. I really appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you, Eloy. Congratulations on all your success. You've done an amazing job. You have a lot to be proud of. I'm excited to watch your career continue to unfold. Maybe you'll become a broker. Who knows? Maybe you'll just go out and build a $10 million agency and sail off into the sunset and retire early.
I hope that happens.
Well, I think you can definitely do it. So listen, for everybody that, if you enjoyed this interview and you'd like to see more interviews, okay, type in the chat box. Let us know 1 to 10 how we did, even with some technical difficulties. 1 meaning this was terrible. You suck, Dennis. Eloy, I'm going to send you a letter bomb. Or 10.
Never done an interview before.
Yeah, you did a great job. And as a 10, that you really valued the information, even though we had a few technical difficulties. Let us know in the chat box the feedback. If you have other topics you'd like us to talk about in the future, and maybe future interviews or future Freight Broker Bootcamp lives, let me know. Again, really appreciate you all being here. Appreciate you, Eloy. Thank you so much. Go make some money, my friend.
I have, sure.
And I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.